Hello YouTube, welcome to my channel, Annabella, and today I'm continuing with my lockdown series of videos. Today I'm going to be talking about the history of pandemics. Do you like my new hoodie? I got this, it finally arrived. I was supposed to get it in March for my birthday, so hence I'm wearing it. Look, it's got rabbit ears on it and it's got a little rabbit there. Anyway, moving on. I'm going to be doing the recent history and pandemics in general of pandemics. Because we've always had them, we've just forgotten. So this is my channel's version of pandemics. Pandemics of the past, we've always had them. So the Black Death, also known as the plague, was started by a bacteria that lived on a flea. The bacteria lived on the flea bit the rat bit the person got the plague and died. Yeah, obviously this is going back in time, this is not recent. Smallpox was also a big killer of people. We have only recently eradicated that disease. Elizabeth I, Queen of England, got smallpox very soon after when she first became queen. She got it very soon after that. And it affected her for the rest of her life because she ended up with pock marks all over her face, hence why she put on that white makeup. We've had measles, which is still ongoing. Measles, mumps, rubella, they're awful. Have your MMR. Diphtheria, cholera. There were outbreaks of cholera in England during the Victorian times. It was awful. It was all to do with water not being healthy to drink, not being sanitised enough. And that's one of the reasons why in England today you can drink alcohol within your own home from the age of 5, and that is due to the fact that the water wasn't healthy to drink, so you'd either had to boil it, so have some tea or coffee, then you know that the water was sanitised and safe, or you'd have to drink ale. Now the ale that they would sell would be very, very weak. It weren't as strong alcoholic drinks, they'd be weak, so that you'd be able to drink it and not die. That's another reason why alcohol and the distilling of spirits was so useful, because it meant that you were purifying your drinking, your water, in a way. We've forgotten all of these things. Lack of basic sanitation is a huge thing. So that's the past pandemics. Now on to recent pandemics, the Spanish flu, which is a huge thing. Actually, it's very similar to what we're facing today. Obviously, it's from the influenza family of diseases, because diseases have different family, and the coronavirus is a completely different one. On to Spanish flu. Okay, pandemics in the recent past. The biggest one we actually had was the Spanish flu, and that happened in 1918. So you had the ending of the First World War, and at this time, also during the end of the First World War, people were getting Spanish flu and they didn't know why. So the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 was the deadliest in history. It infected an estimated 500 million people worldwide, about 1/3 of the planet's population. So a third. So imagine, third is made up of 3. 1, 2, 3 thirds make a whole. Take one away, that leaves you with 2/3 not infected, 1/3 of the whole planet. And killed an estimated 20 to 50 million victims, including 675,000 Americans. The 1918 flu was first observed in Europe, the United States and parts of Asia, before being swiftly spread around the world. At the time, there were no effective drugs or vaccines to treat this killer flu strain. Citizens were ordered to wear masks. Schools, theatres and businesses were closed and shuttered. And bodies piled up in makeshift morgues before the virus ended its deadly global march. It was famous for killing young people in particular. And another thing, during the First World War, you literally had troops, French, German, all of the British Empire. So you had Sikhs, you had Muslims, you had Indians, you had Hindus, you had every religious group you could possibly think of. You had South Africans and African people on the British front line. You had people from Scotland, you had Welshmen, you had Englishmen, obviously, you had people from Ireland. The British front line had people from all sorts of different backgrounds. There was also Chinese workers there building the railroad. Don't ask, there was loads of people there. And what would happen was that these soldiers and workers would end up with leave, so they'd come home, and they'd come home with a kind of gripe. And we now think that today that the gripe was actually the start of the Spanish flu, that it came from the front, the First World War, where you had this huge mass of people from all over the world in one place in horrific conditions. There were no hygiene conditions in the First World War. It was horrific. Trench foot, rats, flooding, it was just generally not great. So that is the Spanish flu. It's interesting that you had to wear a mask. Schools, theatres and businesses were shuttered, were shuttered and closed. You couldn't use them. Very like today. Very like today. Now on to more modern pandemics. Hello. Recent modern pandemics. Okay, we've had several in recent times. In 1967, in Uganda, they had the Marburg pandemic, and that was caused by a bat. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in 1976, they had an Ebola outbreak. Ebola is caused by bats. In Malaysia, in 1999, so the year before 2000, there was a Nipah outbreak, and that is also caused by a bat. And then in 2002, we had the Sars, the first Sars outbreak, which was caused by a kangaroo giving its disease to a bat in China. Are we noticing a theme? We also had in 2003 bird flu, which came from chickens in China. Swine flu happened in 2009, in 2009 or 2009, and that was from pigs in the USA and Mexico. We had MERS in 2012, and that was from camels in Saudi Arabia. We then had another outbreak of bird flu in 2013, and that was from the chickens again in China. We have seasonal flu. So we have seasonal flu from birds, swine flu, bird flu, regular influenza flu, and that happens yearly. So we suffer that every winter, depending on where you live. So these pandemics are happening all the time. It's just that we've never had one global in recent times. Obviously, the 1918 Spanish flu was the last global one that was big, and that was after the First World War, for goodness sake. We've moved on. But essentially, we are still using the same things. You can't use, businesses are boarded up, you can't go to the theatre, you can't go to school, you have to stay in your home. I'm currently in my garden because look at the weather, it's beautiful, beautiful, it's really sunny. But we have to stay here. And then the most recent pandemic we are going through is the COVID-19, which began in 2019, bats again in Wuhan, China. Now, it's either the wet market theory or the research lab theory. Either or, if you go the research lab theory, then patient zero was an intern with a lack of personal protective equipment, or PPE, which isn't surprising. There's a current shortage of PPE everywhere, particularly in the UK, but everywhere. But what on earth is a wet market? Why do these happen? Now, I've looked into the history of wet markets, and it's quite fascinating actually. Wet markets began as fish markets. So you were a fisherman, you'd bring your catch in, you'd put it all up, you'd put it on ice, and people would buy it straight off the boat or straight off the fish market. Really great. If you were a farmer, farmers thought, oh, we could bring our live animals along, we'll do that. So they brought their animals. So wet markets contain fish, they contain animals, so like sheep, goats, cows, really butchered meat. They also contain another trade that we don't really talk about, and that's the international trade of wild animals. And a lot of it is illegal. In the UK, we would call it game, which is legal. So things like your deer meat, your pheasant, your hare, your rabbit, your pigeon. Yeah? Game. If we were in Australia or Africa, you'd call it bushmeat. So some chimp, which is completely illegal. You cannot eat chimp anymore. Though if you were starving and you had to, you would. Obviously we are ignoring the native Amazon tribes that live in the Amazon rainforest, because they still have to eat bushmeat, otherwise they wouldn't live. You know. But it's interesting, if you have recently caught fish, if you have domestic farm animals, if you have domestic pets, all in the same area, so you're looking at fish, birds, farm animals, domestic pets, and any other type of international wildlife like tigers, all being sold. So some of them are alive, some of them are dead, some of them are being butchered. So at one end of the store you might have the live animals, in the middle you might have the butchering process, and at the end you might have the meat. So you've got life and death all happening in one place. Very unhygienic. China has tried to put laws into place, but obviously this is people's livelihoods. So it also develops your street food market, because people go specifically to these wet markets to get the street food that they require for their day. And China is a massive country. It's got the biggest population in the world. So trying containing an outbreak is really difficult. Hats off to how they did it in Wuhan and the other province where it broke out, is the other provinces gave them all the things that they needed and then wouldn't travel to them. So they completely just isolated them and locked them down and contained them, which prevented some of the spread. But it's really important. It's either a wet market or a research lab, one or the other, but we do know something. It's a bat. And Ebola comes from bats, but that's a different virus strain. Coronavirus, as we know it, caused SARS and MERS and swine flu and bird flu. Coronavirus, there's actually 4 coronaviruses that contribute to the common cold, which we haven't got a vaccine for. It takes 18 months for a vaccine to develop, so it's either 1.5 years to 2 years. And there's certain things that have to happen. You have to do obviously your research, your animal trials, and then your human trials. At the moment they're trying to skip the animal trials, or they're trying to quicken it. So who knows what we'll get, whether we will get one, because they started doing a SARS vaccine. That didn't happen. We've not got one for SARS, we've not got one for swine flu, we've not got one for bird flu, we've not got one for the common cold. The flu vaccine, which is influenza, it's a separate family of diseases, which is influenza, is updated every 6 months because the virus mutates so quickly. So what we could be looking at with COVID-19 is SARS mutated, bird flu mutated, and swine flu mutated, or a mutation of the common cold that affects people differently. Who knows? That's what we're looking at. I hope you've enjoyed this video looking at pandemics and the response to them. It's been particularly interesting about the Spanish flu from 1918. I think that was fascinating to research. Hope you can all take solace that if we follow the rules, we stay at home, we do what we should be doing, which is we stay at home, unless we need to go to work, or need to get some medicines, or need to do some shopping, or need to support a vulnerable person. Other than that, you should stay at home, stay safe. It's up to you whether you wear a mask, but stay at home and observe the lockdown. Follow all government guidance and we will get out of this. We've had pandemics in the past and we're still here. I'm pretty much encouraged that we will still be here at the end of this. We can get through it and we will get through it. Please like, comment and subscribe, and thank you for your support. Stay home and peace to you and your family. Bye.